Well, now I'm finally getting to do this video too. This is the political one I kind of promised off of the last one, the last video I did. I was once again delayed by circumstances with roommates and so forth, but I won't go into details about that. This is one I planned to do way back in November. Then other things came up. But to get to it, I'm calling this "Who Watches the Watchmen?" Now, if you haven't seen The Watchmen, see it. Good film. It's about takes place in an alternate reality where superheroes exist. Of course, all superhero movies basically are an alternate reality, aren't they? But this one is it's interesting. It's set in the 1980s. Nixon is still president. Cold War is at its height, which you did see to some extent. But how can I say, crime fighters were allowed at first, whereas in a lot of these movies they're seen as dangerous vigilantes at first. In this one, they were actually allowed, they were welcomed, and then they introduced a congressional act that forbid people to act as crime fighters, and all but one agreed to it. His name was Rorschach, my favorite character in the film, even though he was a sociopath. But he was the one who didn't compromise. So, but the point is, this group was had been two groups. The first one was called the Minutemen. They were a thing of the past, and there's another group called the Watchmen. Think the Avengers or the Justice League, something like that. A group of superheroes, and people were actually supporting what they called the Keene Act. They didn't want superheroes anymore. They didn't want crime fighters, and they were writing graffiti on the walls. Who watches the Watchmen? Here's this group that's supposed to protect us, but who's watch over us, but who's watching them? So who watches the Watchmen? That's where that title comes from. And what's that about? What is my point? Well, brief review of history here. What we've gone over in several years of this country. There's a group who is supposed to protect us, protect people, mainly protect white people from blacks. When it first came about, called themselves the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. Everyone knows about that group, right? We've seen other similar groups come up since then, over the years. Ku Klux Klan became quite powerful in the 1920s. A lot of people don't realize that, but there were a lot of political figures who were Klansmen. Even here in California, OC Weekly recently came out with an article that showed that a lot of the streets and places in Orange County that are named after people, people who were members of the community in the past, they were actually Klan members. So, but that's one thing. That was a vigilante group. It still exists, of course. People pretty much know it's racial history. It's that's the bigotry. But now, other groups have come out. The John Birch Society, very right wing. Protecting us from the evil of communism, that sort of thing. Politicians, Joe McCarthy, again protecting us from the evils of communism, and by basically doing witch hunts, as they were called. Well, there's something right there, the witch hunts of Salem, protecting people from the evils of witchcraft. Ooh. Yeah. We see this happen quite a bit. The NRA. A lot of people are going to jump on it for that, but hey, the NRA started out as a grassroots organization to protect the rights of gun owners and promote gun safety and so forth. Maybe what it started out, but now it's just there to protect the rights of corporations, basically arms manufacturers and ammunitions manufacturers, posing as a grassroots organization. And we've seen other groups too come about. One group that came to the forefront in the 70s was Posse Comitatus. Excuse me. I've got someone calling me right now. Send that to voicemail. Yes, that was Kung Fu fighting on my phone. Anyway, it's one of my many ringtones. I have several. So where was I? Posse Comitatus. Posse Comitatus basically was likes to fight illegal immigration. They believe they're they have some strange ideas. They believe the highest authority should be the county sheriff. That's it. They're extremely right wing. In the 1980s, we saw other groups come to the forefront. WAR, which is an acronym for White Aryan Resistance. That came to the forefront. Of course, you had the skinheads. Of course, they were neo-Nazis. That's a little bit different. It's not, that's not really generally accepted into our society. But things like these other groups that I mentioned, a lot of people, in the militia groups too that come about because he is protecting us. Which brings us to current day. This came to my attention when one of my Facebook friends posted during the Occupy protest, when Occupy Wall Street was actually occurring. There were a lot of civil rights violations going on by the police, violating people's right to protest peaceably. And someone said, "Oh, the Marines are coming. The Marines are coming." Oh, what? That's exactly what we don't need. We don't want someone to put themselves between the police and protesters, because that means they're threatening violence. That's exactly what we don't want. That the whole idea of civil disobedience is that to get a reaction. Sometimes it's going to be a violent reaction. Gandhi didn't call on the Sikhs to protect them during their protests in India, but that just struck a chord with me. And then through a link, I found this group called the Oath Keepers. What they're a group that basically believes that a lot of people in police agencies and the military are being asked to do things contradictory to their oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States. That's a great idea. And there are things in their I don't know what you call it, in their doctrine or whatever, that says that they do not support any upheaval. They do not support revolution or anything like that. They just will not participate in acts that violate the Constitution. Well, that's fine on the surface, but if you look into, read some articles on it and look at the membership, a lot of the people that are in there are survivalists, right-wing extremists, and the kind of people you find in these other groups like Posse Comitatus. Also, another couple more red flags. The two groups that basically were among the first to sing the praises of the Oath Keepers was Fox News Network, or Faux News as I like to call them, and the Tea Party. Ding, 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 red alert, red alert, red alert. Okay, so that, makes it suspicious right there. Like I said, you dig some digging, you find out who's really part. It's the Tea Party types and stuff like that. Because they're going to uphold the Constitution. Well, what is the problem with that? Besides the type of people that join such an organization. And of course, I'm sure there are other people who honestly think it's a great idea, think they're doing the right thing, and forget, the whole thing of guilt by association, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term. But there's something more important here. When you defend the Constitution, there's interpretation when you defend it. See, that's the problem. The Constitution is a good, don't get me wrong, I'm all for the Constitution of the United States and everything, but there are parts of it that were poorly written. They were vaguely written. 14th Amendment, for instance, allowing for corporate personhood. It doesn't allow for corporate personhood. It was put in there to protect the voting rights of freed slaves. And yet, what's it been used for? Never has it been invoked in the Supreme Court for the protection of the voting rights of freed slaves. It was always on behalf of corporations, claiming that it gave them a right to personhood. Obviously, that wasn't what was intended, but that's what resulted. Another thing is the Second Amendment, which we always comes in. Oh, I don't say it comes under fire lately, but the interpretation of it comes under fire quite a bit. A lot of people like to quote, well, it says that, the rights of citizens to bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, that's only the second half of it. The first half of it says to allow for militia, a well-regulated militia. So there's the problem right there. There's nowhere in the Constitution that defines militia. You have to go by dictionary definition or legal definitions of states and so forth. So there's no unifying definition that should be in the Constitution. There isn't one. And can a single person be a militia? Well, considering the technology of arms available today, yeah, they actually could be. That means that person would fall under regulation. But you see, there's a contradiction there too. In the same amendment, it says well regulated, but shall not be infringed. Which is it? Which is it? And there's many interpretations. One I've heard is that if you look at the articles and speeches given during the debate of the Bill of Rights and so forth, discussions, basically our forefathers wanted a standing militia, or did not want a standing military, excuse me. They wanted militia to defend the country because they thought that would be the best way to go. Obviously, that wasn't followed through on. We have standing army. We have had standing army forever, and of course by army, just not mean army, mean Navy, Marines, and of course after World War II, the Air Force came into being. We've got the Coast Guard, and it's just. When I say army, I've mentioned this in other videos. When I say army, I mean I'm using that as a generic term for all armed forces. We have a standing army, so that kind of negates the need for the militia. Therefore, and some would argue the need for the right of citizens to bear arms. But then again, what about hunting? People need. I don't believe in hunting myself so much, but there are people who do it, and God love them, they are eating healthier meat than we buy in the stores. We've got to give them credit for that. I would say hunt by bow and arrow, and if I had to hunt, then that's what would be my choice. But if they're going to say they want a gun to do it, okay, allow them a hunting rifle. But you see my point. This is I'm getting into gun control stuff, and I don't mean to, because this is not gun control advocacy or anything like that. That's not what this video is about. I'll probably make another video about that. But whatever side on the issue you're on, you can see really we need that amendment rewritten or amended itself to be more, to clarify. Does it allow for unlimited restriction, for no restriction at all on firearms, or does it allow for some restriction? Should it only be certain types of arms, or what, or guns, or what? It was kind of vaguely written, and of course, the idea is, did the forefathers know we'd have the technology with weapons that we have today? Probably not. Even though they could have foreseen some changes, I'm sure they foresaw that something would be invented like the repeater rifle, something where you could fire several rounds instead of just one. Wouldn't have to keep reloading the way they did the muskets. But beyond, do you think they foresaw AK-47s or bazookas? Doubtful. They might have foreseen hand grenades, but other stuff, no. Excuse me. It's just water. Anyway, so that's my point, is they're going to defend the Constitution, but whose interpretation? Who's interpreting that Constitution? Now, the guy supposedly who founded it is a constitutional attorney, but there are a lot of constitutional attorneys in this country, and they don't all agree. So, that's my point. They're going to uphold, defend the Constitution for us, but who's watching how they interpret the Constitution? Who's watching the watchmen? So, this is just kind of a warning. Keep an eye out for these people. I'm not saying they're bad, but I'm not saying they're good either, and actually there's several red flags here that should be considered. And that's my take on the Oath Keepers. You can look up their website, and you'll find it's a real good old boy website. Oh boy. Started in the South, so what can you say? But I shouldn't say that. Nothing against the South in particular. But ironically, it seems where a lot of that stuff comes from. South in Michigan. Something about Michigan. My parents are from Michigan, but they won't like that. I don't know. So, next video coming up here. I'll be talking about guilt and indifference. I've been, basically here's what I've got. I noticed them down yesterday because of having all these ideas. I've been wanting to do one on privacy, or illusions people have about privacy. Unconditional love. What does exactly does that mean? It's a term we hear a lot these days. Is it even possible? And guilt and indifference. Is feeling guilty actually wrong, or is it a good thing, or the pros and cons to that sort of thing. So that's what I'm getting on that stuff. I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling a little bit here. Just want to get this video in the future. I will have another warrior video coming up. In fact, I might just do that next because I haven't done that in a while. But in the meantime, namaste and blessed be. We'll see you soon.